Elise briefly left the nursery to answer a phone call. Prisa slipped inside. The baby, fast asleep in his crib, didn't stir as Prisa gently lifted him into her arms. By the time Elise returned, the nursery was empty, and her heart dropped. "Jane!" she screamed, running through the house. "The baby's gone!" Elise sat at her kitchen table, the house silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. The letter about Jane's pregnancy and the accusations against Gabriel had unsettled her in a way she couldn't shake. Her instincts told her there was more to the story, and as Jane's mother, she couldn't stand idly by. She opened her laptop and began digging, starting with the hospital where Jane had delivered her baby. The process was slow and painstaking. Elise combed through public reviews, articles, and forums, looking for any hint of malpractice or scandals involving the hospital. She hit a breakthrough when she found an obscure post from a woman who had once worked as a nurse at the same facility. The post alluded to a history of errors in fertility treatments and poorly managed records. Elise's heart pounded as she continued her search, focusing on Gabriel's connection to the hospital. The name of the surrogacy clinic where Gabriel and Prisa had arranged the procedure appeared repeatedly in her research. She managed to find a news article from years ago about a botched surrogacy case involving the same clinic. It mentioned the clinic's tendency to cut corners to save costs, leading to mix-ups. Elise knew she needed more. She visited the hospital in person, pretending to inquire about their fertility programs for a friend. While there, she overheard a nurse discussing missing records and became certain there was a cover-up. After days of digging, Elise finally pieced together the puzzle. Gabriel's sperm sample had been used in Jane's pregnancy due to a medical error. The realization hit her like a freight train. Her daughter had unknowingly been made a surrogate for a man she barely knew, and the hospital had tried to bury the evidence. Elise's heart broke as she sat across from Jane in their living room, holding the papers she had printed from her investigation. Jane was sitting on the couch, rocking her newborn son, his small body nestled against her chest. Elise took a deep breath. "Jane, we need to talk," she began, her voice trembling. Jane looked up, her face clouding with concern. "What's wrong, Mom?" Elise hesitated, then placed the papers on the table. "I've been looking into your pregnancy, the hospital, and Gabriel Daniels." Jane's brows furrowed as she adjusted the baby in her arms, then reached for the papers. Her face paled, and her hands began to shake. "What is this?" she whispered. Elise placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It wasn't an accident, Jane. Gabriel's sperm was used in your pregnancy. There was a mix-up at the hospital. You were never supposed to carry his child." Tears welled in Jane's eyes as she tried to process the information. "So, this wasn't my choice. This wasn't me," she stammered, her voice breaking. "They used me, Mom. They used my body without my consent." Before Elise could respond, there was a knock at the door. It was Gabriel. Elise let him in reluctantly, her glare icy. Gabriel, sensing the tension, sat down across from Jane. "I need to explain," he said softly, glancing at the baby in her arms. Jane turned to him, her voice trembling with anger and pain. "You knew, didn't you? You knew, and you didn't tell me?" Gabriel shook his head. "I only just found out myself, Jane. The clinic made a mistake, and the hospital tried to cover it up. I never wanted this for you, for us. But now we're connected in a way I never expected." Jane's emotions erupted. "Connected? You think this is some kind of blessing? They used me, Gabriel. My life has been turned upside down because of this. Gabriel looked devastated. I'm sorry, Jane. I'm so sorry. I'll do everything I can to make this right. But Jane couldn't bear to look at him anymore. She stormed out of the room, leaving Gabriel and Elise in silence. Meanwhile, Priska was unraveling. She had been following Gabriel's every move and had pieced together that Jane's baby was Gabriel's. Her jealousy and desperation consumed her. She refused to let a young single mother destroy her marriage and tarnish her social image. Priska hired a public relations firm and began feeding rumors to gossip blogs. The next morning, headlines splashed across social media. Billionaire CEO caught in scandal. College girl claims he's the father. The articles painted Jane as a gold digger, a desperate young woman looking to exploit Gabriel's wealth and status. Anonymous sources described her as manipulative and claimed she had seduced Gabriel for financial gain. Priska, watching from her sleek penthouse, smirked as the public frenzy began. She knew how to control a narrative, and she planned to destroy Jane's credibility before Gabriel could fully connect with her. The effects of Priska's actions were immediate and brutal. Jane's phone buzzed incessantly with messages, some from strangers hurling insults, others from friends expressing disbelief. Her social media accounts were flooded with cruel comments, calling her names like gold digger and homewrecker. At her university, Jane was called into the dean's office. Despite her protests, the dean informed her that her enrollment was being terminated. Your presence here is causing a distraction, he said coldly. We can't have this kind of attention on our institution. Jane left the office in tears, her world crumbling around her. When she returned home, she found her family in turmoil. Neighbors whispered and avoided them, and her mother, Elise, received anonymous hate mail accusing her of raising a disgrace. Gabriel, furious at the media storm, tried to shield Jane by releasing a statement defending her character. But his efforts only fueled more speculation. Every attempt to help Jane seemed to backfire, leaving her feeling more isolated and humiliated. One night, as Jane sat in her childhood bedroom with her baby asleep in the crib, she broke down completely. Her once promising life as a college student now felt like a distant memory. Why is this happening to me? She whispered to herself, clutching a baby blanket. The world had turned against her, and she didn't know how much more she could take. Elise had never been one to back down when it came to protecting her daughter. After piecing together the truth about Jane's pregnancy, she decided it was time to confront Priska directly. Sarah, initially hesitant, eventually agreed to join her, knowing how volatile the situation could become. They tracked Priska to a high-end cafe where she frequently held her social gatherings. As Elise and Sarah stepped into the cafe, the polished decor and low hum of conversations contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside Elise. Priska was seated in a corner, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, sipping on a latte like she didn't have a care in the world. When she spotted Elise and Sarah approaching, her brow arched in mild annoyance. "Oh, what a surprise," Priska said, her tone dripping with mock politeness. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" Elise wasted no time. "We know what you've done," she said, her voice steady but laced with fury. "You've been spreading lies about my daughter, and you're the reason she's being dragged through the mud." Priska smirked, setting down her cup. "I only told the truth. If your daughter can't handle the spotlight, maybe she shouldn't have gotten herself into this situation." Sarah, unable to hold back, stepped forward. "You know damn well Jane didn't ask for any of this. The hospital made a mistake, And instead of helping to fix it, you've been trying to ruin her life. Priska's eyes darkened, her polite facade slipping. Mistake or not, that child is a threat to my marriage and my life. Gabriel is mine. Everything he has is mine. I was protecting what's rightfully mine. Elise leaned forward, her voice sharp and unwavering. Gabriel doesn't belong to you, and neither does that child. You don't get to play God with people's lives just because you're scared of losing your cushy lifestyle. Priska's smirk returned, but there was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. You think you can come in here and lecture me? Gabriel and I built this life together. I won't let some college girl and her mistake of a baby take it away from me. The confrontation grew tense, voices rising as the other patrons began to take notice. Elise and Sarah left after making one thing clear. They weren't going to let Priska's lies and manipulation go unchallenged. Priska, though shaken, resolved to protect her crumbling world at any cost. Gabriel, growing tired of the accusations and uncertainty, decided it was time to settle the matter once and for all. He arranged for a DNA test to confirm whether he was the father of Jane's baby. Jane, though hesitant, agreed. It was better to have the truth than to live in the shadow of doubt. Priska, however, was not about to let the test proceed smoothly. She bribed a lab technician to falsify the results, hoping to plant further doubt about Gabriel's connection to the baby. But her plan didn't account for Gabriel's vigilance. Suspecting that Priska might try to interfere, he hired an independent lab to handle the testing. The day of the test was fraught with tension. Jane sat in the waiting room with her baby in her arms, avoiding Gabriel's gaze. Elise and Sarah were by her side, offering quiet support. Priska arrived unexpectedly, her presence sending a ripple of unease through the room. She sat down across from Jane, her expression smug. "Good luck," she said, her voice low but cutting. "You're going to need it." Gabriel ignored Priska's provocations, focusing on Jane and the baby. "No matter what happens," he said softly to Jane, "I'm here for you." In a week later, the results came in. Gabriel insisted on gathering everyone involved, Jane, Elise, Sarah, and even Priska, so there would be no room for manipulation or denial. The air was thick with tension as the lab technician handed Gabriel the sealed envelope. Gabriel's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. His eyes scanned the paper, and a wave of emotion washed over him. "It's confirmed," he said, his voice choked with both relief and disbelief. "I'm the father." Elise and Sarah exchanged glances, their protective instincts for Jane heightened. Jane, holding her baby tightly, felt a mix of emotions she couldn't untangle. Relief that the truth was out. Anger at how her life had been upended. Fear for what the future might hold. Gabriel, overwhelmed, turned to Jane. "I don't know how to put this into words, but this means everything to me. I know this isn't what you wanted, and I can't change what happened. But I promise I'll do everything I can to be the father this child deserves." Jane didn't respond right away. Her mind raced, torn between her growing respect for Gabriel and the resentment she still harbored over the circumstances of her pregnancy. Priska, meanwhile, sat silently, her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around her. A few days later, Gabriel asked to meet Jane privately. They met at a park, the same park where their connection had first begun. Gabriel seemed more nervous than usual, his typically composed demeanor replaced with a rare vulnerability. "Jane," he began, sitting beside her on the bench as she cradled her son. "I've been thinking a lot about what comes next, about what's best for you, for the baby, and for me. Jane glanced at him warily. "What are you saying?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just want us to find a way to do this together. Not as a couple, necessarily, but as co-parents. I want to be part of his life, Jane. And I want to support you, however I can." Jane's grip on her son tightened. "Gabriel, this is all so complicated. I don't even know where to start." "I know," Gabriel said, his voice gentle. "But I don't want to force anything. I just want to be here, for you and for him. And if, down the line, we find a way to be more than co-parents, then great. But if not, that's okay too." Jane looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. She wanted to say no, to protect herself and her son from the chaos Gabriel's presence might bring. But deep down, she saw the sincerity in his eyes, the determination to make things right. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel nodded, a flicker of hope in his expression. "That's all I ask." As they sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jane felt the weight of her decision. Her future, and her son's, was tied to Gabriel in ways she hadn't yet begun to understand. The scandal surrounding Jane's pregnancy had become too large to ignore, and under mounting pressure from the public and Gabriel's legal team, the hospital launched an internal investigation. The management brought in an external auditing team to review records, interview staff, and uncover the truth about how the surrogacy process had gone so disastrously wrong. The investigation revealed shocking negligence. It was discovered that a senior doctor, Dr. Benson, had rushed through several procedures that day due to an overbooked schedule. Instead of following proper protocols, he had delegated critical responsibilities to junior staff, leading to the catastrophic mix-up that resulted in Jane being impregnated with Gabriel's sperm. When questioned, Dr. Benson admitted to being overworked, but also revealed that the hospital had encouraged cutting corners to maintain profits. The findings caused an uproar. The hospital's reputation was in tatters, and Dr. Benson was immediately terminated. The hospital's administration issued a public apology to Jane and Gabriel, but it did little to quell the outrage. Jane, while relieved that the truth had finally come out, still felt the weight of her violated autonomy. Gabriel promised her he would do everything in his power to hold the hospital accountable and secure compensation for her. Gabriel files for divorce. Amid the chaos, Gabriel's marriage to Prisa had reached its breaking point. Her jealousy, manipulation, and recent actions had only confirmed what he had been trying to ignore for years. Their relationship was toxic and irreparable. Gabriel had tried to make their marriage work, but Priska's refusal to take accountability and her obsession with control made it impossible. One evening, Gabriel called Prisa into his office at home. She entered with her usual air of confidence, dressed impeccably, but the tension in her posture betrayed her unease. Gabriel sat behind his desk, a stack of papers in front of him. "We need to talk," he began, his voice calm but firm. Prisa crossed her arms, her lips curving into a bitter smile. "Let me guess. This is about that girl and her baby again." Gabriel shook his head. "This isn't about Jane or the baby. This is about us. Prisa, I can't do this anymore." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean you can't do this?" "I've filed for divorce," Gabriel said, sliding the papers toward her. "It's over, Prisa." Her eyes widened in shock, but it quickly turned to fury. "You're leaving me? For her?" "This isn't about her. Gabriel replied evenly. "This is about us. Our marriage has been falling apart for years, and you know it. I've tried to fix things, but you've made it clear that you care more about control and appearances than about us as a couple." Priska's hands trembled as she picked up the papers. "You think you can just walk away? After everything we've built together? After everything I've sacrificed for you?" Gabriel stood, his expression resolute. "This isn't up for debate. I'll make sure you're financially taken care of, but I'm done living in a marriage that's built on lies and manipulation." Priska stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. But as she left, a dark plan began to form in her mind. If Gabriel thought he could leave her so easily, he was sorely mistaken. Priska's revenge. Priska's anger and desperation consumed her. The divorce was not just an end to her marriage, it was a public humiliation, a loss of power and status she couldn't bear. She needed leverage to force Gabriel back into her life, and she knew exactly what to do. One night, while Jane and her baby were staying at Elise's house, Priska made her move. Disguised in a dark hoodie and sunglasses, she snuck onto the property and waited for her chance. When Elise briefly left the nursery to answer a phone call, Priska slipped inside. The baby, fast asleep in his crib, didn't stir as Priska gently lifted him into her arms. By the time Elise returned, the nursery was empty, and her heart dropped. "Jane!" she screamed, running through the house. "The baby's gone!" Jane rushed in, her face pale with terror. "What do you mean he's gone?" A note was left on the crib, written in Priska's neat, cold handwriting. "If Gabriel wants his son back, he knows where to find me.